Upon his arrival at a high-profile celebrity fundraiser, President Ibrahim Traoré becomes the target of a famous singer's onstage jesting. As waves of laughter wash over the venue, what unfolds next leaves the entire audience astounded. Grasping a microphone with conviction etched on his face, Traoré ascends the stage. His unforeseen eloquence and profound message render speechless not only the thousands in attendance, but also the vast expanse of the online world. This singular, potent event serves as a testament to the fact that genuine respect is often forged in the most unanticipated of circumstances. It all began on an uneventful Tuesday morning in Ouagadougou. President Ibrahim Traoré was seated, his unpretentious office absorbed in a report concerning educational programs for displaced children. His phone vibrated. It was a message from his aide. "You've received an invitation to the Afraid charity concert. It is a affair, very high profile, this Friday evening." He arched a brow in contemplation. A celebrity gala. It was far from his typical environment. Yet the concert's purpose was to generate funds for West African refugees, a cause that resonated deeply with him. Following a brief moment of reflection, he gave a decisive nod. "Inform them I will be there, but without fanfare." By Thursday night, he was a passenger on a commercial airliner. There was no presidential aircraft, no ceremonial red carpet. It was simply Ibrahim Traoré, clad in a nondescript suit, seated among everyday travelers. His departure failed to capture media attention. His arrival in Lagos went largely unnoticed by the public, but for the concert organizers, it was a source of disbelief he had actually accepted among the celebrities. However, the news was not universally welcomed. One artist, in particular, Dio Blaze, renowned Afrobeat sensation with a following in the millions, viewed Traoré's presence as a mere ploy for publicity. Leaning in close to his manager in the backstage area, he murmured, "Let's give the president a night he won't forget." A little good-natured roast. He was oblivious, as they all were, to the monumental impact this evening would have on everything. The concert venue was a brilliant spectacle of illumination and vibrancy. The atmosphere buzzed with the collective energy of celebrities, social media influencers, dancers, and a swarm of cameras. An audience of more than 30,000 spectators roared with enthusiasm as one star after another delivered their chart-topping hits. President Ibrahim Traoré occupied a seat in the front row, his presence quiet and unassuming, flanked by a small detail of security personnel in civilian attire. No one held any particular expectations of him. He applauded, offered polite smiles, and maintained a humble posture. Here and there, people whispered and gestured, puzzled as to why a head of state would be present without the customary pomp and circumstance. Then Dio Blaze made his entrance onto the stage. The audience erupted. He paraded across the platform, microphone in hand, his sunglasses glinting in the lights. Following his third song, he paused for dramatic effect, mopped his brow, and flashed a wide grin. "We have a very special guest with us tonight," Dio announced, as the cameras promptly focused on Traoré's face. The crowd swiveled to see. "Let's hear it for the president of—" "Wait a minute. What's that country's name again?" "Burkina Faso." Laughter rippled through the hall. Traoré offered a faint, composed smile, remaining perfectly still. "No disrespect, Your Excellency. You're doing a fantastic job. I'm just saying, real presidents don't travel in economy class, do they?" The crowd's laughter intensified. A few onlookers winced at the remark, but Ibrahim remained unaffected. On the contrary, he rose slowly to his feet. And then, a development no one foresaw occurred. He began to walk toward the stage. A profound quiet descended upon the hall. Even Dio Blaze took a step back, bewildered. Was the president approaching him? Ibrahim Traoré advanced with a serene strength. He was not incensed. He was not smiling. He was simply tranquil, like a man who had weathered great tempests and was now merely facing a light drizzle. The audience held its collective breath. An event coordinator scurried toward him, murmuring, "Mr. President, please, you are not obligated to do this." He softly laid a hand on the coordinator's shoulder and whispered, "It will be fine." Upon reaching the stage, Dio paused for a moment before relinquishing the microphone. Uncertain whether this was part of an elaborate prank, Traoré accepted it. He pivoted to address the massive audience. When he spoke, his voice was subdued, yet distinct, each word cutting through the air with the clarity of truth itself. "I did not come here seeking applause," he began, "or to receive preferential treatment. I came here because children across our continent are facing starvation. Families are fleeing from conflict. And this platform, this music, holds the capacity to unify people, not to create division." The audience was utterly silent. Cameras zoomed in closer. Mobile phones were raised. Some attendees were already visibly moved to tears, and he had not yet delved into the heart of his story. "Allow me to share something with you," he declared, lifting the microphone once more. "About a young boy I encountered in a refugee camp only 3 days past." Traoré's voice remained firm as he recounted the experience. 3 days ago, I was at a refugee camp situated on the border between Burkina Faso and Mali. There I met a boy named Mahamudo. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old. A collective soft gasp permeated the crowd. The stage lights dimmed slightly, and the immense screen behind him displayed a photograph. A small boy dressed in tattered rags, his feet covered in dust, his eyes weary, yet he clutched a stick as if it were a knight's sword. He had no shoes, no parents. He said to me, "President, I dream of becoming a doctor. I want to fix people the way they fix bicycles." A gentle laugh, tinged with sniffles, rippled through the audience. But he had no school, no regular meals, only his hope. I sat with him there on the hard ground and inquired what sustained his spirit. Traoré paused. He told me, "Because someone has to care." The stadium was enveloped in a profound silence. "That is the reason I am here. Not to be the subject of jokes, not to be lauded, but for a barefoot boy who still holds on to the belief that someone cares. And if I have the privilege to stand here, then so can he. And one day, he will." The audience, celebrities included, began to stir with discomfort in their seats. A palpable shift was occurring within the room. Dio Blaze stood near the stage's edge, appearing suddenly diminished under the glare of the spotlight. He gazed at Ibrahim Traoré, at a loss for words. The crowd no longer looked at Dio with adoration. Their expressions suggested he owed them an explanation. Traoré turned slightly in his direction. "You are a man of great talent," he said. "With a gentle tone, your voice connects with millions. Employ it to uplift those who are broken, not to deride them." It was not a statement of anger. It was not bitter. It was simply the truth. Dio's throat constricted. Something deep, inside him, fractured. He lowered his microphone, retreated, and vanished behind the curtains. No music played, no lights flashed, only a deep quiet remained. Traoré returned the microphone to a crew member and started to exit the stage. Yet, before he could descend the stairs, something remarkable transpired. The crowd rose to its feet, one section after another, until the entire stadium was standing, applauding, weeping, and chanting his name. Traoré, Traoré. Traoré phones were held aloft, their screens glowing. Live streams cascaded across social media platforms. The internet was set ablaze. But Ibrahim did not wave or smile. He simply inclined his head in a bow. For him, this was never a performance. It was a mission, and that mission was far from complete. That evening, Traoré declined the black SUV the organizers had arranged for him. "No, I thank you," he stated. "I will travel with the medical personnel." He took a seat in the back of a dusty white van alongside 2 young physicians who volunteered their time at refugee camps. The journey was over rough roads, and the air was thick with heat, but they engaged in a profound conversation about mending the kinds of wounds that medicine alone could not touch. Meanwhile, back at the concert site, the world was erupting. Segments of Traoré's speech went viral across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Every social media platform was alight with hashtags like #RespectRoar, Zinhal Voice of Africa, and Zinhal Mahamudastrium. Celebrities who had previously mocked him were now posting tweets filled with shame. Prominent influencers filmed reaction videos, crying on camera, and Dio Blaze, he posted a single, stark message: "I was wrong. I have never felt so small. Forgive me." But Traoré was unconcerned with the internet's verdict. He was already back on the road, making his way to another village, another camp, another forgotten corner of the world, because he understood a fundamental truth: Genuine change is not forged on stages. It is born in quiet moments, on dusty ground, in places the cameras never reach. And the week was only just beginning. By Saturday morning, Traoré was at the far edge of Burkina Faso, touring a rural hospital near the border. The structure had fractured walls and a single functioning fan. The air was heavy with the smell of dust and antiseptic. He greeted each nurse by their name. A little girl, no older than 5, lay on a cot, her breathing labored. Her name was Isatu. She was suffering from malaria, but the facility had no more 4 drips. The nurse whispered, "We exhausted our supply yesterday." The delivery truck is immobilized in mud, 30 kilometers from here. Traoré did not hesitate. He rolled up his sleeves, took up a shovel, and worked alongside local men to free the vehicle. There were no cameras, no news crews, only sweat, mud, and a clear sense of purpose. 4 hours later, the intravenous bags were delivered. Isatu's breathing began to stabilize. What remained unknown to most was that a local youth had recorded the entire effort on his phone. He uploaded the video to YouTube under the title, "Our President Digs for Children." What does yours do? The footage spread with the intensity of a wildfire. Suddenly, journalists, influencers, and even global leaders were all asking the same question: who is this man? But Traoré had still not checked his phone. He was seated by Isatu's bedside, holding her hand, humming a tune his mother had once sung to him. That night, a call came through on the presidential hotline in Ouagadougou. It was from the United Nations. "We would like to formally nominate President Ibrahim Traoré for the Global Humanitarian Peace Award." His assistant paused. "He is not here. Where is he?" the caller asked. The assistant glanced down at the GPS tracker. It indicated a location deep within a forest village. "He is building a classroom." While the world was abuzz with talk shows and breaking news alerts, Traoré was laying bricks with volunteers in a village named Kuruma. The old schoolhouse had been demolished by heavy rains. Children observed him from the shelter of trees, astonished that a president would lift blocks of cement or mix mortars. One child ventured forward and asked, "Are you the real president?" Traoré smiled. "If I wasn't, would I have these blisters?" The boy giggled. By this point, African news organizations had begun to track his movements closely. Yet, he delivered no speeches. He simply continued to work. For him, leadership was not about being seen. It was about being present, especially when no one was watching. And that's when the downpour began. It was a heavy, soaking, relentless rain. But Ibrahim continued to build. Water streamed through the village like a miniature flood, yet no one abandoned the school construction site. Traoré stood in the mud, drenched to the bone, still assisting the workers with fitting the final classroom door. He had no umbrella, no bodyguard. It was just him, wet, shivering, but resolute. The villagers brought him towels and hot porridge, pleading with him to rest. He only acquiesced when a grandmother took his hand, whispering, "You remind me of my son. He died in the war. He never gave up either." She wrapped a scarf around his shoulders and wept softly. Her granddaughter cried with her. By the following morning, the rain had ceased, and the school stood finished. Children danced in the muddy ground. Teachers embraced one another. Traoré hoisted the chalkboard into place with his own hands, and someone painted a mural on the wall, built by the people, with their president. As the sun crested the horizon, a news drone dispatched by a Pan-African channel hovered overhead. That footage reached millions of viewers within hours. The world was no longer inquiring who Ibrahim Traoré was. They were now asking, why are there not more leaders like him? And back in Lagos, Dio Blaze was packing a bag. He felt an urgent need to see this president for himself. Dio Blaze had not been able to sleep. He had watched every available clip of Traoré, from the concert to the hospital to the school construction. Each viewing brought fresh tears to his eyes, tears of guilt, tears of an awakening. "I mocked this man," he whispered to his reflection, "and he built a school in a downpour." The next morning, Dio reserved a flight to Ouagadougou. He traveled without an entourage, without his manager, without bodyguards. He carried only a backpack, a notebook, and the weight of his conscience. He arrived without fanfare, avoiding all media and press. He asked the local people where he might find Traoré. A woman at a market stall pointed down a dusty road. "Try the village of Sapani," she advised. They say he is visiting the widows there. As Dio journeyed on a crowded bus over roads of red clay, he scribbled in his notebook, "I once filled stadiums with noise, but this man fills empty homes with light." By the time he arrived in Sapani, the sun was beginning its descent, and there, beneath a large tree, encircled by elderly women with faces etched by the sun, sat President Ibrahim Traoré, mending a broken water pump with his own hands. Dio was frozen in place. His heart felt heavier than it had ever been. The sun hung low, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air smelled of earth and wood smoke. One of the widows, Mama Salamata, sat next to Traoré and hummed a melody. Her voice was gentle but laden with profound sorrow. As Dio drew nearer, she looked up at him with tear-filled eyes and said, "I lost my husband to bandits. He was trying to protect our harvest. They shot him while I was preparing our evening meal." Traoré listened intently, his head bowed. She went on, "For years, no leader ever came to visit us. No one seemed to care but you. You sat on our broken bench and asked us how we were. I will never forget this." Dio swallowed with difficulty, his lips trembling. He slowly approached Traoré and knelt in the dirt at his side. "Mr. President," he managed to say, "I came here to apologize. I spoke without understanding your heart." Traoré looked directly into his eyes, then at the women gathered around them. "Then listen now," he said, "not to my words, but to theirs." That night, beneath a canopy of stars, the widows sang their songs of loss, of love, of children departed and fields left fallow. And Dio, the celebrated singer, for the very first time in his career, simply listened. Tears streamed down his face. This was the true music. The night sky glittered above the village of Sapani. Traoré stood near a small fire, his hands grimy from the day's repairs, his eyes tired from the long day. Dio Blaze remained seated, humbled and transformed. Villagers gathered around them, sharing stories, sipping tea, and shedding tears. A young boy, perhaps 7 years old, tapped Dio on the shoulder. "Will you sing for us?" Dio hesitated. Traoré placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Sing something authentic, something for them." Dio took a deep breath and rose. He didn't perform one of his chart-topping hits. Instead, he sang a lullaby his own grandmother had sung to him, his voice cracking with emotion on every line. The crowd closed their eyes. Some began to hum along, others wept. When the final note dissolved into the night, a profound silence enveloped them like a warm blanket. Traoré stepped forward. "Tomorrow, we will build a well here," he announced. Gently, no woman in this village should have to carry water for miles ever again. A cheer erupted from the small crowd, and then Dio whispered, "Allow me to fund it, the entire project." The crowd gasped. Traoré smiled, not at the offer of money, but at the sight of a heart that had been profoundly changed. That night, to men one a president, the other a performer sat beneath the stars, and something far greater than fame was conceived by Tuesday morning. Word had traveled across Burkina Faso. Children now waited at the edges of their villages, hoping for a glimpse of the man who acted not like a president, but like a father, a brother, a builder. In a dusty village called Zaunugo, a girl named Mariam stood silently outside her collapsed classroom. Her uniform was torn. She clutched a worn notebook, its pages as thin as onion skin. Traoré spotted her at once. "Why are you not in school?" "Little one," he asked softly. She looked at the ground. "Our school fell down last year. We just sit on stones now and wait for the rain to go away." Traoré knelt beside her and took her notebook. On its final page was a child's drawing of a house filled with children, a flag flying high above it. "This is my dream school," Mariam said. Something in the timbre of her voice broke Dio's heart in two that afternoon. With no press in sight, Traoré and Dio gathered the villagers. By sundown, shovels were in motion, and the foundational bricks of Mariam's dream school were being laid. She hugged Traoré with all her might. "Will you come back when it is finished?" He smiled. "I will come back before it is finished, and I will sit with you in the very front row." That evening, as the villagers danced around a campfire, Dio observed something he hadn't seen before, an old scar on Traoré's wrist. "What happened there?" he asked quietly. Traoré paused, then answered, "When I was 10, my village was attacked." My older brother hid me inside a grain bin before he ran out to create a diversion for the fighters. He never returned. The firelight flickered in Dio's eyes. You were just a child. Yes, Traoré said, but I remember thinking, if I make it through this, I will protect others the way he protected me. A heavy silence settled between them. Dio looked away, his eyes moist. Everything I have ever done, it was for the applause. But you walk through pain and still find a way to carry others. Traoré gazed into the flames. No man gets to choose his scars, but we can all choose what they mean. The nearby children had drifted off to sleep, their empty bowls beside them. Traoré stood up and began to quietly distribute food from a large pot he had arranged to have cooked earlier. He made no grand announcements. He didn't have to. And far away, in cities of bright lights and towering skyscrapers, millions were watching online, weeping not from pity, but because they were witnessing something truly pure, a leader with a scar and a heart, just as the first light of dawn grazed the village rooftops. A soldier hurried to Traoré's side, carrying a sealed envelope. The script was unsteady, but instantly recognizable. It was from his mother. He opened it with care. My son, the world is now seeing what I have always known. When your father passed, I was afraid you would carry your anger forever. But you chose to be kind instead. That is your true power. I miss you. Please be sure to eat well. Your brother would be so proud. Mama Traoré carefully folded the letter and pressed it to his heart. He was silent for a long while. Dio asked gently, "Do you miss your home?" Traoré's voice was low when he replied, "I carry it with me, everywhere I go." Then, something extraordinary happened. One of the widows who had journeyed with them from Sapani began to sing softly. Soon, others joined in. It was a lullaby, the very same one his mother used to sing to him. And as the melody drifted on the morning air, Traoré closed his eyes. He was no longer just a president. He was a son, a brother, a friend, a man whose love for his people ran deeper than any title. And every phone that recorded him that morning captured not merely a man, but a soul. By Wednesday evening, the convoy had made its way back to the capital. The concert that had set everything in motion was scheduled to resume, this time with a hastily arranged second charity event, now billed as Voices of Change. The stadium was packed, phones were held high, but on this night, the people were not waiting for singers, they were waiting for him. Backstage, the very celebrity who had mocked Traoré days before waited with palpable nervousness. When Traoré entered, he stood. "I was wrong," the singer said quietly, his gaze fixed. On the floor, Traoré placed a hand on his shoulder. "You provided me with a stage. That was all I required." Then the president walked forward. No security detail, no podium, just a microphone in his hand. The crowd became still. He stood for a moment, his eyes scanning the thousands of faces, and then he spoke. "Do not cheer for me. Cheer for the children who attend schools without roofs, for the mothers who can still sing after suffering loss, for the youth who believe that change starts with them." No one clapped. No one moved, because their hearts were too full. Within hours, the video of Traoré's address had reached every major platform, but it wasn't only his words that captivated the world. It was the tears he allowed to fall mid-speech when he spoke of his brother. "He died to give me a life. Now, I must live to give others hope." It was the moment he called out, by name, the orphans, the farmers, the teachers, the soldiers, the dreamers, many of whom he had met in just the past few days. And then he said this, "I am not your hero. I am your echo. I am the sound of your forgotten voices." The world seemed to pause. Influencers reposted it. News outlets translated it. Children reenacted it in their schoolyards. Even the singer, who had mocked him, shared the video with a single caption. "I thought I was the star. Turns out I was just in the crowd when history spoke." In the span of 1 week, Traoré had become not just a leader, but a symbol not through force, but through heart. That night, the heavens opened up. Rain poured over Ouagadougou as if the sky itself was weeping. Despite this, thousands stood outside the palace gates, silent, drenched, and waiting. Traoré emerged into the rain. He had no umbrella, only a blanket draped over his shoulders and a young girl by his side. It was Mariam, the girl with the torn notebook. She held a microphone, trembling, and said, He promised he would sit with me in my class. He did more than that. He gave us our hope back." The crowd applauded softly at first, then with growing force, until the sound was like thunder. Tears and rain mingled on countless faces, and right there, with the entire world as his witness, Ibrahim Traoré whispered a solemn vow. "As long as I draw breath, I will never allow your dreams to get wet again." The screen fades to black dot. Dear viewers, if this story resonated with you, if your heart felt what those people felt, if your eyes filled with tears, if your soul rediscovered hope, then please do not simply scroll on. Press the like button, subscribe to our channel, and most importantly, leave a comment below telling us, what would you do if you held a microphone like Traoré? Let us flood this comment section with respect. Let us amplify his voice across the globe, because sometimes it is the quietest man who changes everything. Thank you for watching.